for sure.
Hi, Alex Simon, advocate with CoPIRG here for another one of our conversations from the Capitol. Today, welcoming Representative Jennifer Bacon with us. Representative Bacon sponsored several important bills that CoPIRG backed this session, including a package of investments to combat Colorado's air pollution through investments in public transportation that's going to provide a month of fare-free transit. We know that eliminating transit fares is a way to increase transit ridership, an important long-term strategy towards combating air pollution. She also sponsored bills that would have ended the sale of flavored tobacco products in the state and will provide loans to households impacted by COVID. Thanks so much for joining us today, Representative Bacon.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for all of your support as well. It really mattered this session.
Thanks so much. We appreciate that. It was an exciting and productive legislative session, this one. But before we dive into some of these exciting pieces of legislation, I'd love to just get to know a little bit about you and what motivated you to get started in politics in the first place.
Absolutely. So as you can tell, I identify as a Black woman. And from a young age, I really had the privilege of hearing just stories from my parents. You know, as much as I may look like I'm in my 20s, I'm getting to a place where folks in my parents' generation were really beginning to transition out of leadership. You know, we've lost John Lewis. And when we think about that generation, and for context, my mother grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, and graduated from a segregated high school, and that's one generation ago. And so ultimately, you know, I chose to pursue politics because there's so much work to do to really disrupt or dismantle the systems that have just worked so arduously to keep people in their place. And so for me, when we've just all questioned how do these things happen, part of the answer is who's in these seats to make some decisions to really shift outcomes for folks. And so that is what drove me to politics. I had the privilege of serving my community on school board because of how important public education is. And now I serve in House District 7.
That's awesome. And yeah, we're glad to have you. You know, one of the bills you passed this session was a big bill, SB 180, that included a whole package of initiatives designed to address Colorado's air quality. Why is air quality important to you personally, and why did you decide to act on this issue?
Absolutely, and I'd like to thank Senator Faith Winter for introducing me to that as well. You know, air quality is something that a lot of folks in my community may not be able to articulate with all the vocabulary around toxins, but we know what it means to go to work outside and not be able to breathe. We also see the cloud that's looming over Denver. And quite frankly, the highways in the metro community, whether it's I-25 or I-70, runs through our neighborhoods. And so our community is keenly aware of how they are feeling. They're aware of environment by the way of who has access to things and where people live and quality. And they've just been reaching out lately to say, hey, we think that this is something that should be important to us. Yeah. What can we do about it? And so it's been really important for me to join this conversation to build some of these bridges to the issue. You know, I love all of my colleagues who do air quality and air toxics work, but sometimes we need to change our vocabulary to working people or to people who, you know, just want to buy a home and provide for their families who may be from lower income backgrounds or folks who are new to the space with curiosities. And so I wanted to be able to join this conversation. There is an element, because unfortunately our country is built around economic status, and then so many people were relegated to an economic status given their skin color, that we need to now be intentional and again in dismantling and disrupting those outcomes. So it's been really important for me to be a part of this for a whole bunch of reasons with this bill. In addition to environment, we're also trying to figure out how to get people to work. I represent House District 7, which is the far end of Denver. And so just to get downtown, you know, just don't get me started on public transit, period. And so to introduce people to riding will also introduce people to more opportunities for work, to explore the city, all of those things as well. So that was an added perk for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know this bill had a few different components in it. CoPIRG, as you probably know, is a big supporter of doing the full month of fare-free transit. Is there a particular program or aspect of the bill that was especially exciting for you?
I really do think the fair free transit, what I really enjoyed was talking about transit across the state. And
Yeah.
everything from Bustang to fill in the blank. Like I think it's Prometheus, which is CDOT's new kind of express bus. But when we were in committee, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it's Pegasus, right?
Oh, Pegasus, Prometheus, sorry, Pegasus.
I was
standing
like,
right there.
I was like, do they have another one? Is Prometheus
No,
like the
I was
small?
educating the kids on the myth anyway. But
Yeah, the
but
Pegasus one.
ultimately, yeah, it was CoPIRG came to testify, but we also had kids from Denver public high schools who were like, I've never been able to go to the museum. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And now I can do that. But I do think that, the fact that we were able to even talk about air quality through this was really an eye opener that we could connect it to public transit, because public transit is something that like people talk about in their everyday lives. Like we moved it out of the theoretical. There was also an amendment that we put on there around helping folks in other parts of the state really support their CDL training their drivers. And just for what it's worth, I'm really interested in following that because we do have a workforce issue, particularly for folks because they're not, no one's got a commercial driver's license. So it just really kind of, that bill just kind of brought some things full circle that I think we do have an opportunity to watch as this is executed.
Yeah, that's great. It'll be cool to see the results of that as it unfolds.
Yeah. It was certainly like, oh, okay, I guess we're going to offer a free fare. People need to drive.
Yeah.
There's that.
We also know you sponsored a bill that did not pass, but it would have ended the sale of flavored tobacco products across the state of Colorado. We know that data shows Colorado teens vaping at higher than the national average, and that the majority of teens start with flavored products. What is it you are hoping to accomplish with this legislation?
I was really hoping that we could show through community force, if you will, just the sheer number of people who are interested in it, how people feel about a product and industry and its place in our lives and in our health. Tobacco is almost fundamentally American. Like our story has been connected to tobacco. Yeah. However, tobacco is still industry. And that industry has such an impact on all of our lives, from our health to economics. And through that industry, it's really put a spotlight on all of those things. I mean, at the end of the day, flavored products are being sold because they're effective. I mean, it's business. Business doesn't sell things that don't work. And as someone who, I was on the Denver School Board at the time, we voted unanimously to support a flavor ban. And the reason why we did that is because we see it everywhere. There is no bathroom, there is no parking lot that we don't see these cartridges. We see kids ducking into backpacks and behind books. And quite honestly, if you're going to sell kids cereal with sugar flavor, and that's a booming industry, we expect it to happen with kids. But at the end of the day, the state pays for the outcomes from it. We pay for it in Medicaid, we pay for it in loss of lives. And so we really had to confront this issue on what is it that we value and what is it that we're going to prioritize. And when state makes actions against, products like this, it's typically for public health. And so we really want to put that on the table and saying that our kids are being exploited and manipulated, and we actually have the power to do something about that. And to the extent that this, business or still exists, if we want to respect that entity, okay, but we can do what we need to do to put up some, put them in a sandbox, if you will, to be able to find those balances. And it was worth doing. It was worth exploring for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it was a tough fight. And, given the fact that the state bill didn't pass, what do you see as the next steps moving forward on the issue?
Interestingly, I think there were some political arguments, in pushing these issues into a local or state court. I'm sure the governor and mayors blamed each other. It was hilarious. However, the truth of the matter is, if we don't take kind of like a collective approach to this, if you can't vape in Denver, but you can vape in Aurora, for example, there's no point because it's across the street. But I do think that the coalition was so robust that this issue won't go away. At the end
Yeah.
of the day, we're going to still, parents are struggling with this every day, and they're going to continue to ask what we can do about it. And somebody in government, whether it's the governor or the legislature, needs to be responsive to our neighbors. And so we hope that this issue will continue to be pushed so that we can figure out what we need to do. The federal government is going through notice and comment right now for banning menthol in flavored cigars for the same reason. Canada did it, and at some point, right, we are going to have to answer the question here in Colorado. So we put it to the governor's team as well. Like, what's your response to this? Like, we got to do something. And so, folks have been talking about different approaches to it, but we need to see some action.
Yeah, absolutely. But it definitely raised the issue and sparked a really interesting and intense debate in the state this session.
Yeah, for sure.
So before we go, you also sponsored a bill that will create a pilot program that provides affordable loans to households impacted by COVID. Can you just tell us a little bit about who you hope to help with this legislation and why you felt it was necessary?
Absolutely. So this also came from the Bell Policy Center, and they've been working along with a few advocates in my community to really also take on predatory lending. So this is a bill that addresses that, as well as some of the cliffs that we know our families will really come across as we move out of the pandemic. People were, however we feel about it, unemployment was working, people need to get back to work. The amount of rent has not gone down. And so the truth is, especially with the prices of housing, many people are still living hand to mouth or check to check. And right now, the only place, if you are in a community that has been discriminated against with lending or literally does not have access to commercial banking, you can either turn to a credit card or payday loans with 30% interest. And all you're doing is just paying that back. So God forbid anybody, like, their car breaks down or someone gets sick, that is the difference between staying in a home. And so we wanted to provide a space where people can go who maybe need to recover their credit, but won't be charged 30% interest. And that's what this loan program does. So what we functionally did was created a pilot or a $5 million pool to give to nonprofit lenders to buy down interest rates so that they can lend at perhaps 8 and 9%, instead of like what you might get at 3 or 4% with a good credit score, or 30%, So what we really wanted to do was, again, say we need something that tangibly will help get people through, but also if we can provide an additional product to the market that maybe will pull people away from, these usurious rates.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a great program.
Awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thanks so much. We really appreciate your insight and leadership on these issues. And yeah, thanks so much for joining us, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
All
Thank
right.
you for all of your support. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.